All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. This evening, we're going to actually do a handful of things. Some of this is just sort of responding to some of the absurd conversations I've had this week. And this is my moment where I apologize to the stenographer, the clerk. Much of this you will have already heard, but it bears repeating because I actually sat down with a group of congressional staff. And it was one of those sort of passing conversations where you sit down and there were Republican and Democrat staff there. And they didn't understand some of the most basic numbers of what's going on around us. So the first thing we're going to start with here. How many of you picked up a newspaper and heard anyone talk about the debt ceiling? Apparently it's a really big deal. Fine. But then you hear them say things like, it's the default if we don't just raise it. No, that's not how it works. Default is when you do not pay back your bonds. It's still really important. We're going to actually ultimately have to raise the debt ceiling. Can we do something? It's also going to be very, very, very important. Can we do it in a fashion where we message to the world debt markets that we're taking our debt seriously, that we understand the curve is unsustainable, and we're going to walk through a bunch of boards that basically show the scale of the debt that's coming. But once again, default is when you do not pay back your bonds. Now, we actually had a Treasury Secretary under President Obama that he and I remember had this wonderful conversation when I kept correcting him saying that's not default. He came out saying, okay, we're going to create a new term. It's now called a technical default. And that's when the 30% of government spending that's functionally borrowed every single day, we're not able to pay for that. Fine, call it technical default. Let's just be accurate. But the other thing it's really important, and if there's anyone in Republican leadership listening out there, please hear this. 2011, the United States actually got a downgrade. Standard & Poor's lowered the United States from its AAA rating. They took us down a notch. They did not lower our credit rating because of the debt ceiling. They lowered our credit rating because we didn't provide a credible path on managing the scale of the debt. And this is 2011. The numbers today are devastatingly more ugly. If you can sort of mix that in language. Seriously. So 2011, we moved down to a AA plus, fine. But it was because we were doing nothing about budget deficits. And once again, I talked about this last week, and once again, I think it was yesterday, a member of the left going, well, they're going to get us downgraded if we just don't raise the debt ceiling. That isn't why we were downgraded in 2011. It's because we did not demonstrate to the world markets that we want to buy. Remember, we borrow more than, I think last year it was $48,000 a second. Every second of every day we borrow $48,000. Someone has to buy that debt to finance the 30% of our spending that we don't cover with our tax receipts. Wouldn't the people that buy those bonds like to know we intend to pay them back? Does just raising the borrowing on a limit, which is functioning just like on your credit card, raising the borrowing limit, does that tell them we're going to pay it back? What tells them to pay them back is we're building a plan saying, here's how we're going to basically deal with the debt over the coming decades. And the people that say, we're just going to balance, fine, I can get you to balance, but I don't think most folks have any concept how bloody that would be. So maybe the better way to think about it is the size of the economy. We're going to maximize the economic growth of the economy and try to minimize the growth of the debt so we stabilize what we refer to as debt to GDP. Great concept, but this one just, I don't know why it grates on me so much, is we have these people that think they're geniuses around here. They're going to ruin the credit rating of the United States. It was The threat to the credit rating is we do not communicate to debt markets here and around the world that we're taking our debt seriously. So once again, an oldie but a goodie, and it's already out of date. But I wasn't going to kill another board and printer ink. And this will hopefully make sense. I need everyone to understand. Let's not even worry about 1965. This is last year. 71% of all of our spending was functioning what we call mandatory. Okay, fine. Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, things of that nature. But the punchline I want you all to understand is actually right here. Defense was 13% of our spending. The rest of domestic discretionary was 16. So I got a 13 and a 16. And I'm going to show this on a couple more charts. In 9 budget years, if you look at the CBO report from a couple weeks ago, makes it very clear, in 9 budget years, you can get rid of this entire portion of government, all defense, all discretionary, it's gone. And the growth of this will be so big, you still got to borrow a couple $100 billion. And the next year, it's dramatically worse. So that's what, 2033, which isn't that long from now, but in 2034, Social Security Trust Fund is gone. Are we going to let seniors take a 23% cut? Are you going to double senior poverty? Well, remember, the Democrats have made it almost impossible to have an honest conversation about entitlements. You can't have a conversation how we're going to save Social Security. The president got behind that microphone there and made it toxic. A year's worth of our work, where we've been trying to come up with a way to save Social Security, and we've been doing it with the Senate, with Democrats. And he knifed us. That's really moral. So he stands there, I am going to protect Social Security and Medicare. You promised we're not going to talk about it, there'll be no cuts. And everyone applauds, yes, and fine. There have never been conversations about cutting it. For that year, I was the senior Republican over Social Security and Ways and Means. Not a single person ever spoke to me about cutting it. We were working on trying to how to save it. And now those very people I've been working with run away from the issue saying, look, the president's made it toxic. The year's worth of work, all the money we spent with actuaries, everything else, it's over. You know, Democrats aren't serious. They're going to use it as a weapon. You know, fine, we walk away. And once again, we sit and let the problem fester. And every day we wait, the math gets more difficult. And then we have the inane, well, we'll just raise taxes. A few weeks ago, I did a presentation here on the floor where I showed what happens if you raise the caps. Okay, so the new tax cap for Social Security, I think is what, $160,200. You pay your FICA tax. If you're self-employed, you know, or your employer pays half, you pay half. You just raise it. So every dime of income above that, if you do the incremental benefits, because remember, to be honest, Social Security wasn't a welfare retirement set. It was sort of a forced savings plan. If you gave higher income earners the benefit on, even though you made $1 million, you paid your full Social Security tax on that, you only save about 17% of the shortfall. If you just pure tax, you only save about 33% of the shortfall. You've been lied to. If you actually dig into what was the Bernie Sanders plan, it's not just tax on all income. It's a tax on all income. So over here's the unearned income, over here's the stocks, over here's the businesses. It's functioning. Everything in society gets taxed. And here's the punchline. That still doesn't take care of everything, but it would take care of most of Social Security shortfall. Now, you got another problem. 3/4 of the future debt is actually a shortfall in Medicare. And one of the frauds in the president's budget is they come back and say, well, we're taking care of the Medicare Part A trust fund with $600 billion, $660 billion over the next 10 years. Okay, except I need you to conceptualize this.